Over the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, two large twin-tailed silhouettes bank in a wide, deliberate arc. They are heavy with 9,400 kilograms of internal fuel, and heavy with the geopolitical weight they are designed to carry. These are the Sukhoi Su-thirty MK-2 fighters of the Aviación Militar Bolivariana, the Bolivarian military aviation of Venezuela. They are not on a routine patrol. They are visibly armed, and the specific weapon slung beneath their wings is the entire reason for their existence: the ramjet-powered sea-skimming Ki-31 supersonic anti-ship missile. Footage released by the Venezuelan Air Force has confirmed these patrols, which are not exercises in ambiguity, but a major show of force explicitly aimed at the United States Navy carrier strike groups and destroyers that have, in recent years, escalated operations in the region. The Ki-31, known by its NATO reporting name AS-seventeen Krypton, is not a subtle weapon. It is a Mach 3.5 wave-skimming carrier killer. The U.S. Navy itself takes this specific missile so seriously that it purchased them from Russia under the designation MA-31, precisely to use them as high-speed, high-threat targets to test the limits of its own multi-billion-dollar AEGIS air defense systems. This image of a Su-30 MK-2 armed with a Kh-31 is the perfect distillation of the aircraft's entire strategic purpose. Venezuela cannot win a conventional war against a superpower. Its entire defense apparatus is outmatched in every domain. The Su-30 MK-2 is, therefore, not a tool for winning a war, but a tool for deterrence. It is a delivery system for a specific geopolitical message. We may not be able to defeat your fleet, but with our 3,000-kilometer range, we can reach you, and we possess the specific high-speed weapon to sink one of your $10 billion destroyers on day one. The aircraft's existence is a function of projecting this one-shot, asymmetric threat far into the Caribbean, a threat no other asset in the Venezuelan inventory can pose. To understand how this potent Russian-made symbol of sovereignty came to be the linchpin of Venezuelan defense, one must first examine its American-made predecessor and the political rupture that led to its acquisition. In 1982, Venezuela was a key U.S. ally and, in a move that became a massive source of national pride, became the very first country in all of Latin America to acquire the new General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon. For 2 decades, these F-16s were the undisputed kings of the South American sky. But the political landscape shifted dramatically with the rise of President Hugo Chavez. As his government forged closer ties with Cuba and Iran, its relationship with Washington deteriorated, culminating in a critical event. On May 15, 2006, the United States imposed a strict embargo on all arms sales and, crucially, all spare parts for U.S. origin equipment. This embargo was an effective death sentence for the F-16 fleet, leaving them without the components necessary to fly. In a defiant political pivot, Chavez turned immediately to Moscow. The speed of the transaction was stunning. On July 25, 2006, just 2 months after the U.S. embargo was announced, Venezuela signed a $1.5 billion contract for 24 Sukhoi Su-thirty MK-2 fighters. The first 2 aircraft were delivered with breathtaking speed, arriving in-country by November 30, 2006, and the full order of 24 jets was completed by 2008. This 2-month gap between the F-16's grounding and the Su-30's purchase reveals the true nature of the deal. It was a reactive procurement, not a proactive one. There was no time for a lengthy competitive evaluation. Venezuela didn't choose the Su-30 MK-2 from a list of options. It took what Russia was offering on a hot production line. This politically motivated, rapid-fire decision would have profound, long-term consequences for the fleet's logistics, sustainability, and ultimate combat capability. It also dictated which Su-30 Venezuela would receive, a fact that is the single most misunderstood aspect of the aircraft. The Su-30 is not a monolithic platform. It is a brand name for a family of aircraft split by a bitter internal rivalry between two competing Russian factories, the Irkut Corporation and the Komsomolsk-on-Amur Aircraft Production Association. The Irkut branch is the famous one, producing the Su-30 MKI for India. The MKI is the sports model, an integral triplane design famous for its canard foreplanes and, most importantly, its thrust vectoring control nozzles, which allow for super maneuverability. By contrast, the other branch produced the Su-30 MKK for China, a more conventional and robust design with no canards and no thrust vectoring. The Venezuelan Su-30 MK-two is a direct derivative of the Chinese MKK. Despite this, numerous otherwise reputable sources have incorrectly stated that the Venezuelan jets possess thrust vectoring engines. This is factually wrong. The aircraft is powered by the standard NPO Saturn AL-31F engine, not the variant with vectoring capability. This was not an oversight. It was a critical, politically necessary choice. The Irkut Su-30 MKI, with its complex multinational avionics suite sourced from Israel and France, would have been a political non-starter for Caracas. Washington, having just embargoed the F-16, could have easily pressured its allies to embargo the MKI's subsystems, grounding Venezuela's new fleet just as its old one had been. The all-Russian variant had no such third-party risk. In their hurry, Venezuela was forced to sacrifice the super maneuverability of the MKI for the politically clean and robust supply chain of the MKK. They did not buy a dogfighter, they bought a long-range, two-seat strike aircraft. The MK-2 designation itself merely signifies an MKK airframe upgraded with a new avionics suite optimized for maritime strike. The airframe itself is a testament to this strike-oriented design philosophy. This is a heavy fighter. It is 21.9 meters long, 6.36 meters high, and has a wingspan of 14.7 meters, dwarfing the F-16 it replaced, which is over 4 meters shorter and has half the empty weight. The Su-30 MK-2's empty weight is approximately 17,700 kilograms, but its airframe is reinforced to handle a massive normal takeoff weight of 24,900 kilograms and a staggering maximum takeoff weight of 34,500 kilograms, with some sources citing a 38,000 kilogram limit. This massive maximum weight is what allows the aircraft to carry its 8,000 kilogram external weapons payload. To manage these immense structural loads without prohibitive weight penalties, the airframe's construction utilizes a higher percentage of composite materials and new aluminum-lithium alloys compared to its Su-27 predecessors. These aluminum-lithium alloys are prized in aerospace for their combination of low density and high stiffness. The lineage is betrayed by two unique engineering solutions. First, a beefy twin-wheel nose landing gear, which was required to support the massive maximum weight that the original Su-27's single-wheel gear could not. Second, the aircraft features taller, flat-topped twin rudders. In a classic example of brute force, yet effective, engineering, Sukhoi designers confirmed that these enlarged rudders are not for antennas, as was once speculated, but are used as additional fuel tanks to extend the aircraft's already considerable range. All this mass is rated for a 9G operational limit. The aircraft is propelled to a maximum speed of Mach 2, or 2,100 kilometers per hour at altitude, and a very fast 1,400 kilometers per hour at sea level, with a service ceiling of 17,300 meters. But its defining characteristic, the one that enables its strategic deterrent role, is its enormous range. The airframe holds a massive 9,400 kilograms of internal fuel, giving it an unrefueled range of 3,000 kilometers. It is also fitted with an in-flight refueling probe, which would theoretically extend its ferry range to 5,600 kilometers or a 10-hour flight time. This refueling probe, however, is a perfect, almost humorous example of a recurring theme in Venezuelan procurement: a capability that looks impressive on paper but is practically useless in reality. The Aviación Militar Bolivariana does not possess and has never possessed a single tanker aircraft capable of refueling the SU-30 MK2 in flight. The capability was purchased, but the supporting infrastructure was not. This disconnect between capability and logistics leads directly to the aircraft's heart and its central preordained point of failure: its engines. The SU-30 MK2 is powered by two NPO Saturn AL-31F high-temperature double-circuit turbojet engines, each generating a potent 12,500 kilograms force of thrust in full afterburner. This engine, however, is a logistical and maintenance nightmare, a fact well documented by India, the largest operator of the engine family. The AL-31F is notoriously delicate and highly susceptible to foreign object damage. This is a critical vulnerability for an aircraft operating in the dusty, sandy, and high-particulate coastal environments of Venezuela, where salt ingestion is a constant threat. This problem is magnified exponentially by the engine's second, more critical flaw: its non-modular design. On a modern Western engine, such as the one powering the F-16, a damaged turbine blade can often be replaced as a single module, a procedure that can be done on the flight line. On the AL-31F, that same damage often requires the entire engine to be removed from the airframe and shipped to a specialized industrial-level depot for a complete and colossally expensive overhaul. This 1970s-era design philosophy transforms routine maintenance into a strategic-level problem. Even with an improved mean time between overhaul of 1,000 to 2,000 hours in later series, a significant improvement from its initial 100-hour life, the engine's non-modular nature and susceptibility to foreign object damage create a perfect storm. The engines will fail at an accelerated rate in Venezuela's tropical environment, and each failure will be catastrophically expensive and time-consuming to fix. This is the ticking time bomb, the latent vulnerability, which, when combined with economic collapse, would inevitably ground the entire fleet. The reason the SU-30 MK2 requires a crew of two is to manage the complex avionics suite, the very thing that the MK2 upgrade was all about. The aircraft features a tandem glass cockpit with the pilot in the front seat and the weapon systems officer in the rear. This cockpit was modernized for the MK2, replacing older instruments with four large multifunctional color displays for displaying flight, navigation, and targeting data. The core of this system is the NIIP Mach N001 VEP radar. This is a 1980s-era mechanically scanned array, albeit a competent one. It features a large 1.075-meter twist Cassegrain antenna and, as part of the MK2 upgrade, includes software modes optimized for maritime strike and for measuring the precise coordinates of ground-based radio contrast targets. Its performance is respectable for its generation. It can detect a bomber-sized target at 140 kilometers, track a 3-square-meter fighter at 65 kilometers, and track up to 10 targets simultaneously. This radar, however, is the jet's primary operational limitation. As a mechanically steered antenna, it is physically slower, has a lower refresh rate, and is far easier to jam than modern electronically scanned arrays. To compensate for this, the SU-30 MK2 employs a classic Russian design philosophy: a powerful and complementary passive sensor suite. Mounted just in front of the canopy is the OLS-30, an electro-optical system that combines an infrared search and track sensor with a laser rangefinder. This eyeball can passively detect the heat signature of an enemy jet from over 90 kilometers away, without emitting a single radar wave, allowing for a stealthy, emissions-silent approach. This is augmented by an L-150 Pastel radar warning receiver, which passively listens for and identifies hostile radar emissions, warning the crew they are being targeted. The avionics suite is thus a Generation 4 hybrid, a functional but dated mechanically scanned array radar balanced by a very effective passive attack capability. This suite controls the 8-ton payload distributed across the aircraft's 12 hardpoints. The weapons catalog is a greatest hits of late Soviet export munitions, a comprehensive and, crucially, all-Russian list that reinforces the politically clean supply chain. The primary anti-ship mission is handled by the aforementioned KH-31A anti-ship and KH-31P anti-radiation missiles. For a land strike, the jet employs the KH-59ME and MK, a long-range TV-guided standoff cruise missile with a range exceeding 120 kilometers, and the KH-29T and L, a massive half-ton short-range tactical missile, often described as a Maverick on steroids, designed to destroy hardened targets like bunkers and bridges. The aircraft can also deploy a family of guided bombs in 500-kilogram and 1,500-kilogram classes with TV or laser guidance. For air-to-air self-defense and secondary air superiority missions, the loadout is equally comprehensive, including the R-77, an active radar fire-and-forget missile comparable to the U.S. AMRAAM, the legacy R-27 R&T in both semi-active radar and infrared homing variants, and the formidable R-73E, a high-off-bore sight, helmet-cued dogfighting missile. Finally, a 30mm autocannon with 150 rounds is mounted in the wing root for close-in engagements. The loadout is diverse and powerful, but overwhelmingly biased toward strike, confirming the aircraft's primary role as a long-range deterrent platform, not a pure fighter. On paper, this aircraft was the undisputed king of Latin America when it arrived in 2006. Today, it is dangerously obsolete, not because of its airframe's kinematic performance, but because of its 20th century sensors. This is most evident when comparing it to its two primary regional rivals. The first is the Colombian Kafir C-10 and C-12. This is, on its face, a 1970s-era Israeli-built airframe, a derivative of the Dassault Mirage 5. It should be hopelessly outclassed. However, in the 2000s, Colombia paid Israel for a Block 60 upgrade, a program that bolted on a modern active electronically scanned array radar. The second rival is the Brazilian Saab Gripen E. This is a brand new 4.5 generation, lightweight single-engine fighter, but it is packed with 21st century technology, including the Leonardo Raven ES-05 AESA radar, and what is arguably one of the most sophisticated electronic warfare and sensor fusion suites in the world. In any beyond visual range engagement, the fight is won by the radar. The Su-30 MK2's 1980s-era mechanical radar would be hopelessly outmatched. An AESA radar is a revolutionary technology. It scans faster, tracks with higher fidelity, is extremely resistant to jamming, and can even conduct its own electronic attacks. In a hypothetical engagement, both the ancient Colombian Kafir and the small Brazilian Gripen would see the Su-30 MK2 first. They would be able to launch their missiles and turn away long before the Venezuelan pilot, whose mechanically scanned array radar would be blinded by AESA-driven jamming, even knew he was under attack. The Su-30 MK2 is, in 2025, sensor blind against its neighbors, a 20th century heavyweight pitted against 21st century electronic warfare lightweights. This brings us to the brutal reality of the Venezuelan fleet. An advanced fighter is not a one-time purchase. It is a cripplingly expensive, long-term logistical commitment. After the complete collapse of the Venezuelan economy post-2014, the money to sustain this commitment evaporated. Russia, its strategic partner, is also a vendor. As Venezuela's payments stopped, Moscow withheld timely sales of spare parts. The Achilles heel engine flaw immediately manifested. With no parts and no money for overhauls, the fleet predictably began to die. The safety record became appalling. One Su-30 MK2 crashed in September 2015 while on a drug interdiction mission, killing both pilots. A second aircraft crashed in October 2019, again killing both pilots. A third crashed in July 2023 while practicing for a parade, killing one of the two pilots who ejected. This represents a 12.5% peacetime hull loss rate, 3 of 24 aircraft, and 5 dead pilots, a staggering indictment of a fleet's material state. The readiness rates, as expected, are abysmal. Of the 21 surviving airframes, a 2019 U.S. SU-30 Defense Intelligence Agency report suggested only half were operational. By 2024, analysts estimated fewer than a dozen were fully serviceable, and a June 2025 report states the Su-30s fly only sporadically. The fleet is a paper tiger. The final damning evidence of this collapse comes from a leaked October 2025 report, which detailed the contents of internal U.S. government documents. The documents describe a desperate personal letter from President Nicolas Maduro to Russian President Vladimir Putin. In it, Maduro, who describes the Su-30s as the most important deterrent the Venezuelan national government had when facing the threat of war, begs for Russian help. The request is not for a grand modernization. It is an autopsy of a failed fleet. Maduro is asking for the overhaul of just 8 engines and 5 radars. This single data point is devastating. It confirms the engine hypothesis. At least 4 aircraft are grounded with engine failures. It confirms the avionics are failing. Another 5 jets are blind. The fleet is clearly being cannibalized for parts, and the supply of good engines and radars has finally run out. Most tellingly, Maduro requests a medium-term financing plan of 3 years through the Russian state defense conglomerate Rostec to pay for this tiny critical order. He is not only begging for parts, he is begging for credit. Can the fleet be saved? Maduro's letter did, almost delusionally, also ask for modernization. Russia does have an upgrade package for flankers built at Komsomolsk, the Su-30 SM-2, which would add the far superior AL-41 F-1S engines and Airbus E PESA radar from the Su-35. Vietnam, another Mk2 operator, is considered a prime candidate for this. But for Venezuela, this is a fantasy. A nation that cannot pay for the overhaul of 5 radars cannot finance a fleet-wide, multi-billion-dollar upgrade. Furthermore, Moscow is now mired in its own war in Ukraine and is itself under the most severe sanctions in its history, its own aviation industry struggling for parts and technology. Russia has neither the spare industrial capacity nor the financial incentive to rescue a non-paying, strategically distant client. The Venezuelan Su-30 MK-2 is, therefore, a perfect and tragic case study in the critical difference between possession and capability. It was acquired in 2006 as a potent symbol of sovereignty. Its on-paper specifications, a 3,000-kilometer range, an 8-ton payload, and Mach 3.5 missiles, made it the most formidable fighter in Latin America. But a symbol is all it is. An advanced weapon system is a living organism. It requires a constant, nutritious, and very expensive diet of spare parts, training, and industrial support. Venezuela's fleet was born of political spite, built on a shaky logistical foundation, the AL-31F engine, and then starved to death by economic collapse, sanctions, and neglect. Today, it is a paper tiger, a hollow deterrent that is, as the crash logs tragically show, statistically more dangerous to its own pilots than to its enemies. It is not a fleet. It is a boneyard, slowly returning to the earth on a ramp in Barcelona. The story of these aircraft is not merely one of technical specifications or geopolitical maneuvering, but a cautionary tale about the nature of military power in the modern age, where advanced weaponry without the industrial ecosystem to support it becomes nothing more than expensive scrap metal adorned with fading national colors, a monument to ambition, outstripping capacity, and political theater, masquerading as strategic deterrence. What makes this collapse particularly poignant is the contrast between the original vision and the present reality. When Hugo Chavez stood beside the first delivered Su-30 MK2s in late 2006, he saw them as instruments of national liberation, symbols of Venezuela's ability to chart an independent course free from American influence. The aircraft were paraded through Caracas, displayed at air shows, and featured prominently in state media as proof that Venezuela had escaped the clutches of Washington's defense-industrial complex. The pilots selected to fly them were among the best in the Venezuelan Air Force, many having cut their teeth on the very F-16s these Russian jets were meant to replace. They underwent intensive training in Russia, learning not just how to fly the aircraft, but how to employ its complex weapons systems, how to coordinate with ground controllers, how to execute the kind of long-range maritime strike missions that would, in theory, keep American carrier groups at bay. For a brief moment, Venezuela possessed not just the hardware, but the knowledge and the will to use it effectively. But intention and capability are not the same thing, and the gap between them widens catastrophically when the supply chain collapses. The maintenance crisis that has gutted the Su-30 MK2 fleet is not unique to Venezuela, but it is uniquely devastating there because of the compounding factors at play. Other nations that operate Russian equipment, from India to Vietnam to Algeria, face similar challenges with the AL-31F engine and the labor-intensive maintenance requirements of Soviet-era avionics. But these nations have maintained functioning relationships with Moscow, have continued to pay for parts and overhauls, and have invested in building domestic maintenance infrastructure. Venezuela did none of these things, not because it didn't want to, but because it couldn't. The economic collapse that began in earnest in the mid-2010s destroyed not just the government's ability to purchase spare parts, but the entire industrial base that might have supported domestic maintenance. Machine shops closed, skilled technicians emigrated, and the technical schools that might have trained a new generation of maintenance personnel lost their funding. The result was a cascading failure where each grounded aircraft made the situation worse as working jets were cannibalized to keep a shrinking number of aircraft in the sky, which in turn increased the wear on those remaining operational platforms, accelerating their decline toward unserviceability. The human cost of this decay extends beyond the 5 pilots who have died in crashes. There are the pilots who remain, highly trained professionals who watch their squadron mates perish in accidents that might have been prevented with proper maintenance, who climb into cockpits knowing that the aircraft they are flying might kill them, not because of enemy action, but because a critical component is 1 flight hour away from catastrophic failure. There are the ground crews who work with outdated tools and missing parts, who perform miracles of improvisation to keep even a handful of jets airborne, who know that every shortcut they are forced to take increases the risk to the pilots they are sworn to support. And there are the families of the dead, who must reconcile the official narratives of heroic sacrifice with the mundane reality that their loved ones died because a wealthy nation chose to buy symbols rather than build systems, because pride mattered more than pragmatism, because the political theater of sovereignty was deemed more important than the unglamorous work of logistics and maintenance. Looking forward, the prospects for the Venezuelan Su-30 MK2 fleet are grim. Even if Russia were willing and able to provide the requested parts and overhauls, even if Rostec extended the requested credit, the fundamental problems would remain. The aircraft are nearly 20 years old now, approaching the end of their designed service lives even under ideal conditions. The airframes have been stressed by tropical heat and coastal salt air, by hard landings and emergency maneuvers, by the inevitable wear that comes from 2 decades of use. A comprehensive overhaul and modernization program would cost billions, money Venezuela does not have and will not have for the foreseeable future. The country's oil production, once the engine of its economy, has collapsed to a fraction of its former levels. International sanctions have cut off access to capital markets. And the political instability that has characterized Venezuela for years shows no signs of abating, meaning that even if resources were available, they would likely be diverted to more immediate priorities, like maintaining internal security or propping up loyalist military units. The Su-30 MK-2 fleet, in other words, is dying not from a single catastrophic failure, but from 1,000 small cuts, from the accumulated weight of deferred maintenance and unpaid bills and broken promises, and there is no realistic scenario in which this trajectory reverses itself.